Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Creative Zone webinar. My name is Lorenzo. I am the CEO of Creative Zone. Creative Zone was established 11 years ago, and we are the largest business setup advisory company here in the UAE. We do hundreds of business setups on a monthly basis, and we have been supporting over 45,000 business owners, startups, and entrepreneurs set up their businesses. Now, the UAE has been introducing, I would say in the last 1 or 2 years, a stream of compliance issues in turning sort of the sector and the industry to become a lot more compliant. I think this has come as an approach to becoming more transparent with the international community and the international bodies in showing that the UAE was taking measures in becoming more transparent and making sure that the companies that are operating in the country are operating within the legalities of the financial systems and economic procedures set in place. Thank you for all your comments. I see many people are very excited about today's topic. There are indeed a lot of very interesting new set of rules and regulations that have been set up, and I think we can get started. I think the first point that we wanted to discuss today is UBO. I mean, UBO, Ultimate Beneficial Ownership, has been introduced back in 2020. So it's soon going to be about a year since its introduction. And I believe that there is a new set of a new date as the date that this should be submitted from the companies. So maybe Sishan, take us a little bit about on the history on when this was firstly introduced. What are the main ideas behind this new regulation? What has been happening in terms of the companies on the way that they've been submitting their UBOs to the authorities in the country?
Thank you, Lorenzo. So yeah, to have an introduction about UBO, the UBO regulations came into place in August 2020. And at that time, the authorities gave an ultimatum to have these certain things to be submitted to authorities and maintain some kinds of registers with them. And the ultimate goal for having these regulations in place was for companies to create and maintain registers of their ultimate beneficiary owners, including their partners, their shareholders, or any nominee directors that they might have. So the first question that comes from anyone's point of view is, who is an ultimate beneficiary owner? So the regulations say that anyone who directly or indirectly controls or has 25% voting rights in the company would be classified as an ultimate beneficiary owner. If, for instance, there is a situation where no one can be identified or there is doubt on who the actual ultimate beneficiary owner is, then you see with whom the control of the company lies. That would be considered as a UBO. And even if that's still not clear, then the responsibility is in the hands of the person who is managing the senior management positions or has control over the management of the company. So what information is basically required for these regulations and how to stay compliant? Companies need to create these registers. These are basically called UBO registers or partner registers or directories, where they have to record the names, nationalities, place of birth, residential address, ID numbers, MHID or passport numbers, for example, basis of why they are classified as a UBO. All of these things need to be maintained from a company's point of view. And these are supposed to be also submitted with the authorities, with the licensing authorities. And now what's going to happen is, and we've already seen this happening, where all the licensing bodies are incorporating in their trade license issuance or renewal processes, where they're asking for this information pre-hand or on renewals. So that's one of the key things. This will become a process in the whole UAE where you submit these on, from the first day onwards, you will have these submitted to the authorities and on renewals as well. But one key thing that we need to be aware about UBOs is uh, companies also need to submit this information when there's a change in any of the information that is within those the requirements. If there's a change in them register, if there's a change in the residential address, or the passport number is updated, these need to also be informed to the authorities within 15 days of the change. So how do companies actually do these? Each jurisdiction has their own way of doing this, right? So some authorities have it in their customer portals, on their pages, and some authorities have online forms that need to be submitted. Some authorities have a manual form that needs to be submitted over the counter. So it's different for every jurisdiction. So that's one key thing, that you need to be aware of what licensing authority that you're in, and what's the procedure on how this needs to be done.
And
Then,
I'm guessing it kind of differs between the different type of structures. For those that have individual shareholder companies that they're sole shareholders, it's about them submitting that they are the ultimate beneficial owners of the company. How does it work when you have, other corporations as shareholders within those entities that are being set up?
So essentially, the process is same. What needs to happen is companies need to identify, okay, so we have this company, and the company has a corporate owner, and then who that corporate owner, who the owner of that corporate body is, right? So it goes up to the mark where the ultimate beneficiary, who is enjoying the ultimate benefit out of the most, the most down the layer body, down the layer company. So if company ABC has an owner, company XYZ, they would have an individual owner, right? So it goes along the chain up till you can identify an individual person who is the ultimate beneficiary. So
I think
that's
that, yeah, go ahead.
one good point there is that there are companies also who have who are listed companies in the stock exchange, and sometimes there are companies who are owned by listed companies. In those cases, the UBO regulations do not apply to them, because there would have been enough transparency rules within those stock exchanges, and one single ultimate beneficiary might not be possible to be identified.
Sishan, what could be the penalties if this information is not kept updated with the jurisdiction?
So the penalties will be up to 100,000. It can be up to 100,000 depending on what has been done or what has not been done. So at least 2 or 3 registers needs to be maintained, or at least one for UBO itself needs to be maintained at all times, and the changes need to be submitted as well. So depending on what's being done, what's not being done, and how is it being done, all of those factors play into this. 100,000 is up to 100,000 is one thing, but there's also a possibility of suspension of licenses, and these penalties will start to be applied by MOE from 1st July. So MOE has basically given a general deadline of 30th June, but each individual jurisdiction then has their own deadlines. So for example, Jafza had 5th June, Ajman had 20th June, which was yesterday. Then Abu Dhabi mainland, Dubai mainland, Sharjah, they all had 15th June, but the grace period was allowed till 30th June, right? So some other bodies still have a deadline of 30th June, and likewise. So you need to be very sure on which body you're under, and how or what the deadline is, and what's the process that you need to follow.
Pamela here is asking, what happens if you do the initial registration for UBO rules and you receive the SMS but never receive an email? Have you encountered people getting this type of issues?
No, it might be just that process with your authority where they only send an SMS confirmation. So if you have an SMS, that's a valid enough response, and you would have a confirmation email from your end that you've submitted this. So that would be enough. And also, at the same time, just submitting this information is not enough. You need to maintain these registers with you. So whenever you identify there is a change in any of that information, you can immediately send this again to the authorities. So, for example, someone's passport gets renewed. You need to be aware of that and then submit this information within 15 days to the authorities. That's really important here.
Angela is asking, what about when there are multiple partners in the company? Are the UBOs only those shareholders who have a percentage bigger than 25%?
The ultimate beneficiary is considered as such because there will be some people who will have more share than others. If all of them have enough shares, or let's say at most there could be four people who have 25% each in a company. So all four of them, if they are the actual beneficiary, then yes, they would need to be considered as such. So, and sometimes there would be a situation where someone who doesn't have enough shares but is the actual beneficiary owner. So, if there are doubts along the situation where someone might not be the true beneficiary and someone might be, so someone who has 10% share but actually ends up controlling the company, or his decisions are the major decisions that are accounted for. So, even those will need to be declared as well and kept the register as well, kept in the register as well.
We have another attendee asking, is this only for the multiple partners in the company, correct? Or does it only also apply to individual shareholders?
It applies to both. So there needs to be one register for ultimate beneficiary owners. There needs to be a separate register for partners or shareholders. So there will be situations where companies have ultimate beneficiary owner, and there will be situations where they have ultimate beneficiary shareholder plus partners or shareholders. So you need to maintain both the registers individually.
We seem to be getting a lot of questions or statements from people saying that they have submitted the UBO to the authorities on the online links provided, but they never received any confirmation via email or SMS. They're asking what would be the next step. Is this what appears to be happening? Some of the jurisdictions are not coming back to people submitting their UBOs?
It might be because for each jurisdiction, the process is being refined further. And we've seen this across the face where back in 2020, for example, people were required to submit this manually. And now they're being required to do this online. So this process is still getting refined. So people might not get those responses, but if you have enough proof that you've submitted it, that would be enough for them. At least you have that own proof with yourself that you submitted it, and you can take a screenshot maybe and keep it with you. And the authorities, you can get a confirmation. There would be the email IDs that they've issued to public, where you can just get a confirmation or ask them whether this has been done, and you can drop an email saying that we've submitted this. Please confirm if you received it. So that would be enough.
We have 150 people connected. It's a great audience. It looks like this is a very important topic for today. We're getting a lot of good questions. Mohammed, you can start thinking of a few other things that you will add to this. I know that your strength is a little bit more on the VAT and AML type of regulations, but if you have anything that you would like to add to this, I'll give you the floor to add something. I'm reading a few of the other questions that are coming up. There's so many good questions on this UBO. Vikas is saying, in our entity, there are two shareholders with over 25%. One of them is a resident of the UAE, while the other is not. Is it required to have both shareholders submit UBO, or is one enough for the UAE residency?
No, so ultimate beneficiary is anyone who is a beneficiary owner, right? So both can be beneficiary owners. Both may need to be submitted. It depends on each case. So they would need to be on the beneficiary owner as well, and if they're partners as well in the company and they have shares, then they would need to be on that other register as well.
Excellent. Mohammed, anything that you would like to add at this point on this topic?
I will be able to add more topics related to the VAT and will be able to advise the businesses about the compliance with the VAT regulations and how to remain compliant with these regulations.
You said DED in terms of UBO regulation or the other topics?
The VAT regulation, the tax regulation.
VAT, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you said DED.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, before we move on, Sishan, anything else that we can add on this? I'm looking at a few other questions on UBO.
There are some companies who, one thing, it's just this UBO situation is being highlighted now again in June throughout this month. It's just to promote, like you said, Lorenzo, it's just to promote the economies, the UAE economy's transparency and have more resilience in the international market as well, the global market. Because UAE is trying to be a hub for the whole world to, attract more business and, be one of the happiest cities in the world. So they're trying to aim for that. And this comes in line with that as well. And this is a drive this is an awareness drive from the authorities, which is in hand with the AML regulations.
So for those of the attendees looking at this webinar, are you able from ZZTA to support some of the clients? Is there something that we can do from their side? I have a question here from Jen saying, I have submitted this to Creative Zone in October. Will Creative Zone be submitting this as it's promised in the email? Of course, from our side, but Jen, I recommend that you also reach out to your client relationship manager and make sure that this information was well received, and I'm sure it has been, but do get that confirmation from your client relationship manager to tell you that this has been submitted to the authority. Sishan, are you from your side of the entity supporting with UBO registrations?
Yes, absolutely, Lorenzo. Anyone who needs any assistance regarding submitting these or wants to know the process on how we can do this for you, I'd be happy to get in touch with you. You can get in touch with us through any of the email IDs that we have, sales and compliance, and then we can, get in talking terms with you and take this forward for you.
All right, maybe I think at this time, then if you could write the email address where people should be sending their queries on, so that our team of people, of advisors can reach out to these clients and answer any other further questions on UBO, and also potential help those that still haven't submitted their UBO registrations.
Sure, absolutely.
Then we can move on to the other topics. We have 4 important topics to discuss today. We have AML as well. Maybe link to this as well, maybe to bring you into the conversation. Mohammed, is the issue of VAT. VAT was introduced back in 2017, late 2017, and introduced and formally introduced in January 1st, 2018. Tell us a little bit of how far have we gone in the implementation. Of course, it's fully implemented VAT, but what is it that the companies should know on how to do the VAT reporting? How are things moving along when it comes to VAT in the UAE?
The VAT was implemented with effective date of 1st of Jan 2018. And now it's more structured, and the Federal Tax Authority is more active with the tax audits, conducting audits for the businesses to make sure that they are compliant with the regulations. So the start of the compliance will come with looking at the VAT registration. Any business in the UAE who's doing supplies, whether to clients inside the UAE or to clients outside the UAE, would need to look at the VAT registration and to make sure if they are required to register for VAT, they do so within the time frame, as all businesses are required to register once they exceed a threshold of 375,000. So once you exceed that limit, you would need to register within 30 days to avoid any penalties or any complications with the tax authority. After that, it will come to the submission of the VAT returns, which is most probably is quarterly VAT returns. For some exceptions, it's on a monthly basis. And all businesses are required, which is the very important requirement, to maintain their accounting records. So this will allow you to look at your VAT registration if you have exceeded the threshold or not. And also the tax authority have the right to ask for the accounting records to conduct audit for your business. So today we will be talking about a major update that recently happened from the UAE government, which is a very good initiative to help businesses in the UAE. This initiative is about the penalties. So the cabinet has issued a cabinet decision number 49 of 2021, which is amending the penalties. So this has a very good impact for the businesses that have penalties previously, or that may be late for registration or late for VAT return submission, as this have a lot of reductions in the penalties. And also there is a very good news that the penalties can be reduced by 70%. So I will go through the updates quickly, through the updates of the penalties, what has been changed in terms of the penalties, and then we can have the questions. If anyone has any question, I will be more than happy to answer the questions. Okay, so the first thing that was updated is failure to maintain the accounting records. Previously, it was 10,000 in case the first time and 20,000 in case of repetition, and 50,000 in case of repetition. Now it has been reduced to 20,000. And the very important update is regarding the registration, whether it's for VAT or excise tax. And it was previously 20K for the late VAT registration, as we have mentioned that the VAT registration should be submitted within 30 days from exceeding the threshold. Now, with the new initiative, it has become 10K for the late VAT registration. And then we'll go to failure to inform the authority in case of you need any amendments. So basically, when you submit your registration, you provide the tax authority with your license, your Emirates ID and passport copy of the authorized person. So any change to these documents, you need to inform the tax authority. Failure to do so, previously it was 5,000 and 10,000 in case of repetition. Now it became 5,000 and 10,000 in case of repetition. Before it was 15,000. And the other thing about appointing a tax agent. So a tax agent can represent the company with the tax authority. So if you have appointed a tax agent, you should inform the tax authority of the appointment of the tax representative. The penalty for that was 20K, now it became 10K. Then the very major update regarding the late payment penalties. Before it was very hard penalties, but now it has been reduced, and it makes it more comfy for the businesses to do this and to make sure about their compliance. So now the late payment penalties is 2% of the unpaid amount on the day following the deadline, and 4% monthly penalty due after 1 month. Before it was a little bit more than this. It was 2% on the second day of the deadline, and 4% on the 7th day, and 1% daily after 1 month. But now it's better. Also, the regulations have given the businesses now very good opportunity to look at the VAT returns that were submitted earlier, because if you have any mistakes in the VAT returns previously, now they have reduced the penalties for the voluntary disclosure and also the due date for the voluntary disclosure. So if you have any mistake in the VAT return, for example, submitted in 2018, now it's the golden chance to correct your VAT returns that will have less penalties than before. And the due date for the voluntary disclosure now is considered as 20 working days from the date of the submission of the voluntary disclosure, which means that you will be able to avoid the late payment penalties. Before, the late payment penalties were applied from the due date of the old VAT return. So, for example, if you have a VAT return ending March 2018 and you submitted a voluntary disclosure now, the penalties will apply since 2018, which will give you 300% of the penalties. But now the due date became in the future, so it will come in next 30 days. If you pay within the 20 working days, you will be able to avoid these late payment penalties.
Okay. All right. Look, we're getting quite a few good questions related to sort of the operations side of things. One good question here, it says, when making the first VAT registration, what are the controls done by the authorities? What documents are required in terms of invoices, full accounting reports, and other similar reporting systems?
All right. This is a very important question. So when you do the VAT registration, the Federal Tax Authority would need the full legal documents of the company, plus the documents of the authorized person who is the authorized on the trade license, would be the Emirates ID and passport copy. Regarding the financial documents, it would need the copies of the sales invoices signed and stamped, and also would need a turnover declaration, which shows the amount of your sales since 2017. This will give the authority idea when you have exceeded the VAT registration threshold, and based on that will allocate for you the effective date of the VAT registration.
Very good. Another good question says, does a VAT declaration also need to be filled if the company only issues bills outside the UAE where VAT is not applied, respectively 0%?
If the VAT is applied at 0%, you need also to do the VAT returns. You need to submit the zero rated supplies. It has to be reported. However, you are not required to pay, but there is obligation to report the sales that are outside the UAE if it's taxable at 0%. But there is another option which is good for some businesses. If you don't have so much expenses that you pay VAT on them, for example, this would be suitable for some of the consultants that they don't have much of expenses. There is an option is you have only zero rated supplies, 100% of your supplies are zero rated. You can apply for exception from the VAT registration, which will not require you to submit any VAT return. You will only do one-time application for exception. So this will make the business.
Yeah, go ahead.
This will make the business not required to do the administrative work, to be required to submit returns within deadlines, but this also will not allow you to claim back any VAT you have paid. So this will be suitable in case you don't have much expenses and the administrative work will cause for you headache more than the VAT that you would claim.
Other attendees are asking, please confirm VAT is not applicable if you're invoicing from the UAE to a company in another country. So when invoicing from the UAE to other countries, are they supposed to be adding VAT to these invoices?
This depends on the transaction. For these questions, the tailored advices, I would recommend to go through your transactions in detail. But in general, the export of goods or services will be taxable at 0%. So that means you won't need to pay VAT or to collect VAT from your client, but this needs to be taken on case-by-case basis.
Add,
yeah, go ahead, Sishan.
Just to add one more thing here. Yes, you won't be required to pay any VAT, but you will still be required to register yourself under the VAT system, as those will be considered as zero-rated transactions. So that's one thing that people also sometimes confuse, that it's zero-rated. So it does not need to be taken into account for. But it's really important to understand the difference between zero rated, exception, and out of scope. So that's one very key thing that needs to be understood. And uh, the rest, I think Mohammed has been very clear on.
Mhm. Now, another question that keeps on popping up is the issue of maintaining commercial books and bookkeeping. Is this mandatory for all type of entities, whether it's a free zone, different jurisdictions, mainland entities?
Okay. The maintenance of the accounting records is required from all the businesses in the UAE, whether you are in a free zone or a mainland, also whether you are registered for VAT or not. This is obligatory requirement from the tax authority, which is applicable to all businesses in the UAE. And as we have seen in the penalties, there is a penalty if you don't maintain your accounting records.
Hmm. Good, good. Sishan, anything that you can add from your side? I'm scrolling through the questions. There's a lot of questions coming through. Anything that you would like to add at this point?
For this question, I just like to give the reason why the authorities need these to be kept, the books need to be kept. It's just because when they ask, okay, you're not supposed to be registered under VAT, this maintaining your books also gives you enough proof to show to the authorities that, okay, this is the reason why we are not applicable under the law to register for VAT, for example. So it's very important for you, and it's just good business knowledge as well to understand where are you from a business point of view. Your actual situation, whether you're making money, whether you're not, just understanding the cash flow of a business does not help at the end. You need to understand from an overall point of view whether you're actually making money or you're losing money. So that's why it's really important from yourself, your angle as well, to maintain commercial books.
Hmm. Another good question says, how many years of accounting do need to be kept on record?
All the accounting records are required to be kept for 5 years. So for example, for any tax invoice you issue or you receive, you need to keep it for 5 years, and the tax authority has the right to ask you for any of these documents for 5 years. There are some exceptions to this. For example, the real estate, for the real estate, you need to have the records for 15 years. So there are some exceptions, but the normal records would be required to be kept at least for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. We're getting quite a few questions that relate to the structure and how books should be kept. They're saying some people are suggesting certain apps. Some other people use Excel. Mohammed, what could you recommend is sort of the most used tool for keeping books?
Regarding the bookkeeping, you need to follow the accounting procedures and accounting principles, which are international principles. However, you would need also, while doing your accounting, to look at the VAT aspects on this. So, for example, when you record any expense, you would need to look if this expense should be booked as eligible for claiming back for VAT or ineligible. This is a very small example for this. But regarding the software, it's not mandatory to have accounting software. However, I would recommend to have an accounting software which is approved from the Federal Tax Authority. This has been tested by the tax authority, and also they are sure that this will help you to be compliant. But for the accounting software, you can use the accounting software that would make you feel comfortable as a user, but also I would recommend to have it approved from the tax authority.
Maybe for those that would like to receive a copy of this software, maybe write to the email that Sishan has provided. Did you write the email on the chat function? Yeah, Sishan, maybe update the email once again, because there's a lot of questions coming through and maybe people are losing the email. So put the email again once there. If anybody would like to receive a copy of this accounting software, Mohammed could send the link. Mohammed, Sishan, maybe you can answer these questions.
Sure.
Are we expecting increases in potentially VAT applied in the UAE, maybe in the years to come? What's the word out in the street?
Well, increase in, you mean increase in the VAT percentage, or
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we've seen in the region where Saudi Arabia has increased their had increased their percentage to from 5 to 15, but that was mostly to curb with the COVID situation. For here, for UAE, we haven't heard any particular. There are rumors in the market that the percentages might increase or not, but I don't believe that at least in the near future, in the next 5 years or so, that will happen.
Mm.
Yes, there are these costs that the government is trying to adhere to, but also at that same front, the UAE government is being very open and trying to raise awareness and making UAE a very livable place, affordable, and they don't want to put too much pressure on people to not stay here. They want this as they have a vision right now. They want UAE to be one of the happiest place, happiest city, especially Dubai, happiest city in the world. So they wouldn't, put that in jeopardy just to, increase with increase in taxation.
Mm. Okay, excellent. Well, to the attendees, I'm receiving dozens and dozens of questions. They're citing examples. We have one says, if we purchase from an Abu Dhabi company, but the goods are originated from Germany and sent to our customer in Turkey, what would be the VAT implication? I mean, some of these questions are going to start being a little bit too technical. I recommend that you write to the team. We're not going to be able to answer all of these questions on the webinar itself, but do reach out to us and we'll be happy to address. We have their compliance at cztaaccounting.ae and sales at cztaaccounting.ae. I want to move on. We have two more topics to raise for today, which are ESR and AML. Sishan, let's get going with ESR. ESR was also introduced back in 2019. What is the main idea behind ESR? Why is ESR being introduced? What's the main objective of ESR?
Yes, okay. So ESR being a very major topic, and it has been doing rounds since it came into place in 2019. The main focus of this regulations is for people to avoid, manipulating the system and being able to avoid paying taxes where it's due. So in cases where companies there are companies set up in Europe, for example, and then they set up licenses in UAE, and they just invoice through the UAE company and have their actual operation set up in Europe, uh, they are able to do so and avoid paying taxes to the local authorities. So this law was, then implemented so that these businesses, some key businesses, certain which conduct certain activities, they have their substance within UAE as well. So that would mean that they are actually doing business from UAE itself and not just routing the money through here to avoid paying taxes. So that's the key message on these regulations and why these regulations are coming into place. So that's the main thing. But to go beyond and explain on what ESR is, for people who don't know, there are any business within UAE, or there are certain licenses, certain type of licenses, who if conducting certain activities, there are 9 activities listed under the law. If you're conducting one of these activities, then you would fall under this law. What would happen when once you fall under this law is you would need to check whether you're earning income from a relevant activity, and then be able to submit a notification and a report. And part of that report is also being able to put in adequate resources in place so that you are able to generate that amount of income from the relevant activity. So if you're generating an income from a relevant activity, you need to have enough expenses in place. You need to have enough or adequate employees, professionally qualified employees, have an office. The direction of management of a company needs to be done from UAE itself. Those are the key things that I would highlight under the ESR law.
What are the main activities that fall under ESR? Which are those companies that have those activities or are involved in those activities that need to report for ESR?
So for ESR, there are in total 9 activities. Um, it starts from banking businesses, insurance businesses, investment fund management businesses, lease and finance businesses, headquarters businesses, shipping business, holding company business, intellectual property business, and then there's distribution and service center business, which is mostly where all these services come into place.
Mm. And where is the filing supposed to be done? Who is the sort of federal or local entity in charge of receiving these filings?
So what you basically have to do is, if you fall under the law, then there is an online portal on the website of Ministry of Finance where you have to create your login and then do the economic substance notification through that portal itself, and then submit the economic substance report through that portal as well, if required. And it's just on the law. Now, previously, there was a different situation where everything had to be submitted through the respective authorities. Now they've made it centralized and it needs to be done through the MOF website itself.
Excellent. And this is also something that you help with clients and companies in the UAE with the submission of the ESR. There is a report that needs to be filled in, an assessment whether the company falls under the regulation or not. This is something that you also are able to help companies, correct?
Absolutely. What we do is, for companies, we will not only assess whether your company actually conducts a relevant activity. First of all, we do like to do that because you need to first understand what a relevant activity is. And that's something that we can help. We assess whether your company does any of those activities. And there's a whole big description of all these separate activities. You need to assess whether you fall under one of those and which one. And then you need to file the notification accordingly within 6 months of your financial year end. We help with that as well. We help in filing the submission. We get that done. And then the next stage comes, if you're earning income from a relevant activity, then you need to be able to submit a economic substance report. So that is a very comprehensive report where you have to disclose financial information, and not just financial information, other information as well regarding your employees, whether they're qualified, how many board meetings you have in a month, what's the office space that you have in place, any information that would help proving that you have enough substance within UAE comes on there with respect to your relevant activity. So it's very important to understand the level of income that you earn from a relevant activity, and then being able to store that information, keep that information recorded for 5 years, and then be able to submit that information.
Hmm.
One key thing that I would like to mention.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Yes,
go
sir.
ahead.
One key thing that I need to mention here is right now ESR is also a hot topic right now, because for many of the companies the financial year end is December, right? So now the people who have a financial year end of December, they have a deadline of filing a notification by end of June. So any company right now who has a financial year end of December 31st, 2020, they need to file their economic substance notification by 30th June 2021. It's very important. So please make sure you're doing that. Another key deadline that is in place in June is, if you have a financial year end of June 2020, then you would have had your notification deadline back in December or January, extended deadline, but now would be the deadline for your economic substance report. So what that means is, if you filed a notification previously and you have earned income from a relevant activity, this is the deadline for you to file an economic substance report. It's very important to understand the difference between these.
Yeah, yeah. We have a question from Pamela. She's saying, is it enough for your bank to have submitted this ESR for you? I've never heard this before. Is it banks submitting ESRs on behalf of clients?
No. The banks do not submit an ESR report or ESR notification on your behalf. It's maybe a service of an affiliation of the banks, with that they've done this for some clients or introduce it with someone, but banks do not themselves do any submissions on ESR. Companies are on their own responsible to file the economic substance notification and the report if required. This is your responsibility and you have to do it yourself. Otherwise you may have a legal representative who can do this for you. But banks, I don't think I've heard that banks would be doing this for you.
Is this something that has to be done yearly? Is there a cutoff date for the yearly submission of ESR?
So yes, people need to each year check whether they are still conducting a relevant activity, and then file the notification within 6 months of the financial year end and a report within 12 months. So what I mean by each year they need to assess, there might be a situation where, for example, a holding company, they have shares in a company. So in one year, they might not earn any income, right? So they need to submit a notification saying that they don't earn income. In that year, that would be sufficient. But in the next year, when they actually earn income from holding shares, then they would need to first have a notification submitted, and then later down the line, when they've earned income, they recorded it properly, they also need to submit a report as well. And it could be a possibility where even before that, they might have been in a year where they have not invested in any shares and the company was just open and not done any activity. So in that year, they would not have been required to file anything. So it depends on each year, and you need to assess each year what you've done throughout that year and then accordingly file whatever you need to.
Yeah, a related question to that comes up saying a holding company has its only income generated by dividends. Last year, it received dividends, and we have filed for the ESR notification and the report. This year, no dividends have been paid. Shall we still file both forms?
So being paid, this is different situation. If you've earned them from a financial point of view, if you've earned them and they're not paid, you still earn them. So if the company that you've invested in, they've declared that you will be paid at a later date or whatever that might be, you still would show this in your P&L that you've earned income. So then you would have to file both these things. But if the company has actually not generated any profit, and that's why you've not earned any dividend income, then you would only need to file a notification saying that we have not earned any income, but we still do conduct a holding activity. We have these shares in this company, and that's it.
Mohammed, anything that you can add on this topic from your side? I understand that you have also helped clients in their submission for ESR reporting and etc., correct?
Yes, what I would like to add here, when you look at the relevant activities, you don't look at the activity that is only mentioned on your trade license, as the authority has clearly mentioned that you need to look at substance over form to be used. This means that looking beyond what is mentioned on your trade license, you need to look at what is the activity that you are conducting actually. So I would recommend all the businesses to start doing initial assessment to look at their activities, if it's within the scope or not only the activity that's mentioned on the trade license.
Excellent. All right, well, time is flying. It's already 3:54, and we still have one last topic to discuss. So we're going to leave ESR for now. And again, if you have more questions on ESR, there's dozens of them coming through. Please email the team on the given emails, and we'll be happy to address some of those queries as well. Final topic, AML. Sishan, again, what can we explain about the new regulations being in place about AML, anti-money laundering, that were introduced already back in 2018? There were changes to the law of AML, I think a few months ago. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Sure. So the law has been in place from 2018. In 2019, what they did was they they brought an idea of designated non-financial business professions, where there are certain sectors who now fall under the law and are required to carry out the obligations mentioned in the law. One of those obligations is, for first, just to mention the sectors that are within the law or fall under the law: real estate brokers and agents, then precious metal and gems dealers, independent auditors, accountants. Then there are corporate service providers, and then legal consultancy firms as well. These sectors are being asked to carry out the whole AML procedures in place, so that they try to avoid any illegal form of money that goes into the UAE economy. That's one of the major reasons why AML is being highlighted. There are several awareness campaigns going on regarding AML. We saw some deadlines in March and April, and this UBO is also connected with the AML. And people are going to start to be, inspected. We've heard that recently there have been 231 sanctions, levied on businesses where they've been, penalized. And recently there was another news in the market that one company was fined for 1.3 million. So people need to understand that if they fall under one of these sectors, they need to not only have a GoML registration done. That's just one of the things that you need to understand, that's an obligation on you. The other things with this is having, all the obligations taken care of. And the penalties for these are very severe. They start from 50,000 and they can go up to 5 million, and having suspensions of license or licensing being cancelled. So this is a very big drive that the ministries, authorities are trying to do. And this is where it comes into place. The deadlines have already been, gone way back. Now the companies will start to be, penalized as soon as, hope maybe from 1st July, or maybe whenever they think they might need to penalize. But inspections are already going underway. People are being inspected, and penalties will be, levied on these people.
Mm. For the submission of AML, there needs to be a compliant officer being assigned for submitting these reports, right? How does it work? What can we tell the companies on how they have to go about the presenting of this compliant officer for putting forward this reporting?
So generally, what needs to happen with respect to AML is, the company needs to appoint a compliance officer who would be in charge of developing a policy, a company-wide policy, and onboarding kind of a process for clients, for suppliers, etc. They would need to be able to train the employees and the management as well. They would need to be registered on the GoML system, and through that GoML system, they would need to submit any suspicious transactions, any suspicious activity that they see across their company, not just with regards to their clients or suppliers, but anything that they feel they're getting involved in. They need to report these to suspicious transaction reports and suspicious activity reports through that GoML system. And recently, in June, on 2nd June, there was another communication by the authorities where precious people, companies dealing in precious metals, they have a new system within the GoML system that they need to report these suspicious transactions under that system. So anyone who is dealing with cash, for example, for transactions, they would need to be reported under this new system for these specific, dealers. So it's very important to know what your obligations are. They're going to be very, very customized to each and individual company. So one company can have a different policy and an onboarding process with their clients. Another can have a different one. And it just needs to be reflective of what you do as a business.
Mm. What happens if there is failure in reporting this suspicious activity by the company that can see that there is suspicious activity taking place?
So again, the first thing is penalties. It would start from a penalties phase. If there are suspicions and the authorities actually carried and you've not reported it, the penalties start from 50,000. That's just one case, and depending on how severe it is, it can lead to suspension or cancellation. So this case where there was a jewelry company who had been penalized 1.3 million, right, off the bat because they had no, or they were not having enough compliance procedures in place.
Excellent. Mohammed, any thoughts to round this topic of AML from your side?
It's very important to make sure about the compliance with the AML. The penalties are very hefty regarding the AML, and I would recommend all the businesses that are within the scope of these activities to do the AML registration. And I would recommend to seek a professional advice for this, as the registration is a little bit tricky and needs some of experience to do the AML registration.
Excellent. Well, it's 4 o'clock. I think we reached the limit of the timing that we have set for today. Maybe Sishan, I'm going to ask you one more time. And our tech team also, I think we have a landing page. If you would like to receive more information, we have a document that we can send over to you. Please fill in the following form. I think there's a landing page. There we go, that our tech team can put forward. There's a landing page. Please fill in your details there. Our team will get in touch with you. Also, the email the email addresses that were provided. Also, maybe Sishan put the email addresses there one last time. We're getting some feedback. Thank you so much for today. It's our pleasure to our list of clients and to the extended community of business owners out there in the UAE from abroad. From our side, Creative Zone, as we said, we help business owners, entrepreneurs with anything related to starting, setting up, growing, and running your business here in the UAE. And we have our sister entity, Creative Zone Tax and Accounting, that helps and facilitates anything related to tax, ESR, compliance, UBO, and anti-money laundering matters. So please feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions, you need some support in any of these topics. We're happy to engage with you and support you. From our side, thank you for connecting. Sishan, Mohammed, thank you so much for taking the time for being here with us.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you so much to all the attendees. Thank you. And we'll see you again in the next one. We usually do one of these a week. We had 150 people connected. So it's a pleasure to see such good feedback from our audience. Thank you. All the best.